everyone, this video is to show you how to set up an assessment once you've created it directly in your course. And so we're going to go through the setup tab as well as the question tab, which allows you to add questions directly into the assessment, as well as from an item bank, assuming that you've pre-made the item banks ahead of time, which we show you in a different video. So on the setup tab, which is where we'll start, there is this instruction box, which is just for any information that students should know before they actually start the assessment. And so I like to tell them, for instance, that they have a time limit on the assessment so that they know what to prepare for. Moving into the assessment settings, so you can absolutely turn on the time limits, and so you can indicate as many minutes as you'd like to give them. Something to keep in mind here is that the enable window, which we talked about in a previous video, is something that allows students access into the assessment. If you want to limit the amount of time that students are actually in the assessment and able to work on the assessment, you need a time limit to cut them off. Another thing to keep in mind is that time limits will start as soon as students open the assessment, and so if you think that some students are going to need a little bit more time to answer some of the questions because they're a little bit more complex, we do recommend giving a little bit of a buffer. And so if you think that students that are faster at taking the test will probably take about 15 minutes, but you know that some students may need a little bit more time, we do recommend buffering to like 20, 25 so that everyone has the appropriate amount of time to take the assessment without getting kicked out of it. The next setting that you can turn on is the randomly order. And so if you turn this on, this means that the questions that are in the assessment show up in a different order for every student. This is to help kind of alleviate cheating concerns. This does not change, though, what students see on the assessment. Every student will see the same questions. They will just see them in different orders. This is different than another option, which is enabled by using item banks, which is the add randomized items, which I'll get into a little bit later. You can absolutely do both of these things together, but for this particular assessment, so that you can see the difference between randomly ordered and then add randomized items, I'm going to turn it off for now and then turn it back on, and we can show you both options. Show possible points for each question during the attempt. I like to turn this on for students just because it helps them kind of plan. They can see how much each question is worth, and they can decide how they're going to manage their time as they make their way through the assessment. Students can flag questions for review. I also like to turn this on. This allows students to flag a question that they're not sure about, so that when they are brought to the review window at the very end of the assessment, it can remind them that they wanted to go back and double check their answer. Eliminating answer choices, completely up to you. It might make things a little bit easier for students, kind of depending on the types of questions you're asking. I'm going to leave it off for now. Calculator, you have two different types, the basic and the scientific, and the ruler, you also have the 15 centimeter and the 6-inch. You can absolutely turn those on if that's necessary. Protractors, ability to highlight text, which allows them to kind of pinpoint specific areas of questions that are interesting or that they want to keep in mind as they're thinking things through. That's an option for you, but not required, as is the notepad, additional option to help them kind of process. I'm going to leave all of those off for this particular assessment. So the student settings are really important. Allowing students to view results after an attempt is submitted. The default is set to no, and we do recommend that you leave it at no during the assessment because you don't really want students who finish the assessment early to be able to go back in while other students are still finishing up theirs. And so we recommend leaving it at no during the assessment, and then when you're ready to review the exam with your students at a later date, you can turn it to one of the other two options, which are yes. This allows students to go back into the assessment and see what their responses were, but it will not tell them the correct answers. And so this is important if you have like a matching question, which with partial credit, they may have gotten 2 out of 4, and they'll see what they put, but they won't know which ones they got right and which ones they got wrong if you select yes. If you want them to know what they got right and wrong, you need to select yes with correct answers so that they can see what the correct answers are, and that'll indicate which ones were right and which ones were wrong. Again, after the assessment, turn it back to no, just because it just helps to alleviate cheating concerns. You can have students submit as many attempts as you want. It does max out at 20, which is ample amount of times. I'm just going to leave it at 1. But if you do change it, it'll ask you how the final grade will be determined. There's the highest score option or the last score. And so, again, completely up to you. I'm going to go with the highest score. Let's just leave it at that for now. Save the settings, and then we'll go to the add questions. The questions tab takes you to this section, which is where you can see all the different question types on the left-hand side. Some of these questions are auto-graded, which is fantastic, a huge benefit of Schoology assessments. Some of them are not. And so to help you navigate that, we did create a resource with all the different question types in our Learning Center course. And so if you scroll down in the course, you'll find this green folder, and you're going to want to click on the different question types. That'll take you to this page. It has a Google Doc embedded, but you can also just click the link and it'll open in a separate tab. And this is what it looks like. It tells you in the table of contents the different question types, whether or not they auto-grade. And then the purpose of this document is to show you how the different question types can be used. We tried to pull from a bunch of different disciplines to give you different ideas and help you maybe navigate and decide which question types are best for the types of responses and assessments you're trying to build. And so hopefully you find this a useful resource. But let's head back to the actual assessment and create some questions. So let's just add a question directly into the assessment, which is something you can absolutely do. Multiple choice question is pretty straightforward. So let me just type one out. Then you select the correct answer, so which is not a Mario character. You can shuffle the options so that the correct answers are shown to students in different orders. Again, anti-cheating measure. Exact match, because this is only one correct answer, and so we're going to go ahead and click Save. This is what the question looks like when it's finished. It has the question preview. It tells you what question type it is. And then you can set the number of points that you want it to be worth. This is only worth 1 point for me because, again, only one right answer. These three dots give you several options. You can edit the question. You can also edit just by clicking directly onto it, copy it, or delete it. The copy is a really nice feature if you have a question that's very similar, because copying keeps all of the settings that you had for that question. So when I open this up, you'll see that it is an exact replica of the previous question I made. And so why don't we say which is a Mario character, and let's just move some around. And let's replace some of these with other random characters. And so you're going to have to click the correct one, change the correct answer, but you'll notice that the settings are still there. So the shuffle options and exact match are still the same. It makes it a lot easier and it's a lot faster than creating a new question entirely from scratch if the question is very similar. So that's how you add a question directly. As it mentions, you can drag and drop to reorder the question, and so now I can make one first, one second. This is if you do not randomly order the questions, then obviously the number that you put them in, you can designate how students are going to see the questions. If you randomly order questions, it doesn't matter quite as much. Okay, so that's how you create a question directly into the assessment. I prefer adding from an item bank, and again, this assumes that you've created an item bank in your resources ahead of time before you created the assessment. We have another video that shows you how to do that. But you'll see this option, add from item bank, and so I'm going to go to the group item bank that I share with the Schoology lead teachers. We're going to have two of them, common questions that all students are going to get, and then the add randomized item feature will show you with this second item bank. So in the common question item bank, there are several options. I can select all 6 items, which is super fast, or I can individually select the ones that I want. I can also set the number of points that I want them to be worth ahead of time before importing them into my assessment. And so I'm going to leave that as is and add the 3 items. And you'll notice that they come in as individual questions, and so they just fill in the bottom. And so that's all good to go. Now, the really cool feature of item banks is the add randomized item. And so going back to my item bank, I have my randomized item bank, and I have 20 items in this item bank. And so what I'm going to do is click the add randomized items button. And from the 20 items, I'm going to pull 5 of them. Each of them is worth 1 point. This is something that you can't change after the fact, and so each of them is going to be worth the number of points that you've set it as. And so what add randomized item does is it pulls 5 items from this 20 item random item bank randomly for each student. And so each student is going to see 5 different questions from this item bank. This is super helpful in creating different variations of a test, and is obviously very useful in terms of alleviating cheating concerns. And so if you organize your item banks by topic so that each student experiences the same topics, but you have a set of maybe 15 questions and you pull 3 of those per topic, then students are going to have the same type of assessment with the same topics covered, but a very different experience. And so let's add these items into our actual assessment. And you'll notice that it looks different. Questions 6 through 10 are the add randomized items. This is how Schoology indicates that they are going to be randomly pulling from the item bank. And so let's see what that actually looks like. I'm going to move this up so that we can see it a little bit more quickly when we preview the assessment. So questions 2 through 6 are going to be our randomly pulled questions. So let's preview the assessment. This lets you see what the assessment looks like to your students. And so the first question, because I haven't randomly ordered the questions, should be the same when I preview as many times as I want, which is not a Mario character. So question 2 is the triangle, Romeo and Juliet, cookies, even numbers, and Roman numerals. Okay, so I'm going to close that and preview again so we can see what it looks like for a different student. Again, the first question is the same because I did not turn on the random order. But question 2 is the brand of car, match the contraction with its meaning, Roman numerals, social media platform, and Y2K. So you can see that the questions are completely different, right? Which is the wonderful power of the add randomized items. And so you can have both. You can have questions that everyone gets, and you can have the randomized questions just to mix things up a little bit, which is a really, really helpful feature. And so I mentioned earlier that you can have the add randomized items and the random order. So I'm going to go back and show you what that looks like. I can go back into the setup and actually turn that on, and let's save the changes. Then I'm going to preview the assessment. And so the first question is going to be completely different. It's going to be random. And so again, completely different question. And so you can see that the randomized items, the add randomized items, are in a different place. And so you can have both happening at the same time if you wanted. Okay, I think that's pretty much everything. Do let us know if you have any questions.